She stumbled through the fluorescent-lit parking lot behind the strip mall diner with a cracked plastic container pressed to her chest, breath smoking in the night air, knuckles whitened around a lid that wouldn't quite snap shut. Wind whipped napkins and fryer dust into spirals, and a torn eviction notice fluttered across the asphalt like a pale moth before slapping against her ankle. She didn't bend to pick it up. She kept walking, shoulders curled inward, shoes split at the toes, coat too thin to argue with the cold. Inside the container were fries gone soft and a wedge of pie fractured like a broken moon. Inside the girl was a fiercer hunger than the body ever admits out loud. Before we begin this journey, subscribe, because what happens next could change how you treat people. She moved past the dumpsters, past the supermarket that never fixed the humming light, past the glassed-in office of the urgent care clinic where nurses counted minutes between patients. She crossed under the thrift store awning and turned into the narrow alley that cut behind an apartment building with buzzers nobody answered. Her name was Emily, 21, a face shaped by caregiving and grit, and older grief living in the set of her mouth. In the daytime, she cleaned tables with a rag that never quite got clean. At night, she cleaned hope itself, scraping it free of grease and guilt, and saving whatever crumbs she could carry back to her younger brother. She walked faster as the wind knifed through her sleeves. The container slid in her hands. She tightened her grip the way you steady a baby. Across town, the lights of a glass and steel office tower winked off one floor at a time like a city going to sleep. In the back seat of a dark sedan, a boy in a puffy coat drew a smudged heart on the window and stared through it. His eyes followed everything the world offered: street musicians, sleeping dogs on stoops, a woman balancing a cake box. In the driver's seat, a man in a suit loosened his tie with the neat frustration of someone used to motions obeying him. He was Richard, chief executive of a company that printed badges for conferences and airlines, a man whose day measured success in upward curves and signed contracts. His flaw hid in plain sight, a quiet, practiced habit of ranking people by lanyard color, by job title, by who stood in what line. To him, kindness was a metric to be performed at fundraisers. Efficiency was virtue. Appearances were truth. The sedan idled at a red light near the diner where the night shift faded into the rhythm of clattering plates. The boy leaned forward, breath clouding the glass. His eyes flicked from window to alley and widened. "Daddy, it's her!" Richard's hand hovered over the signal. The honk from the car behind pushed him through the light, but the boy's voice stuck in the air of the car like a flag planted in the middle of the road. It wasn't the first time he had said it. A week earlier, the boy had gone to the diner with a friend from school and come home full of a story that his father hadn't fully heard. A girl behind the counter who'd slipped him a slice of pie when his allowance hadn't quite covered lunch, who'd laughed at his knock-knock joke and insisted the world owed more pie than scolding. He told it quickly and happily, the way kids tell you everything, because everything is still possible, and his father had patted his shoulder and returned to a spreadsheet. Now the girl was a small, bundled figure under a failing streetlight, plastic container cradled like a pocketbook. She looked both fragile and unbreakable, a contradiction that made the chest ache to see. Richard slowed. The boy pressed his palm to the window. "Daddy, it's her!" He should have kept going. A person like him didn't turn into alleys for strangers. His world had rails. There were rules about interference, policies about risk. But grief has a way of unspooling straight lines into tangled questions. Years earlier, he had promised his late wife he would live a life that noticed people, that saw them. He had said he would. He believed he did. He donated, he mentored, he hired. But seeing the girl, seeing the container, hearing his son's voice, something old and solemn stirred. He turned at the next corner and eased the car along the side street parallel to the alley. The headlight threw a pale rectangle past a fenced-in, littered patch where a community garden had once tried to bloom. He parked badly, carelessly, an unthinkable thing for a man who measured angles, and stepped into the wind. The boy hopped out and wrapped small fingers in the cuff of his father's coat. They took 2 breaths that felt like voltages and walked. Around the bend, past a broken pallet and a toppled recycling bin, the alley opened to a shed with no door. Cardboard reinforced by rain-softened tape leaned against a fence. Blankets were pillowed around a patch of concrete as if comfort could be arranged by geometry. A thin boy with a bruise fading along his jaw watched them with the posture of someone ready to vanish. Emily dropped to a knee. She put the container in his hands. He peeled the lid back, and the smell of pepper and grease and sugar rose into air already too thin. The boy in the puffy coat took a step, and then another. His eyes mapped the scene and landed on Emily's face. "It's her!" Richard's throat went tight in a way he would later describe to himself as humility, a word he had always confused with soft weakness. He saw not just poverty, but its practices, the ways people make a world out of not enough, the rituals of rationing, the courage of scraping dignity out of salvaged heat. He felt the moment arrived where a man chooses to be consistent with his policies or with his soul. The first thumbnail-worthy picture froze there in time. The 2 children under a failing streetlight, one holding a cracked container of fries and fractured moon pie, the other offering half his gloves, fingertips frayed, the space between them alive with the invisible warmth of recognition. The next morning, the city remembered itself. Coffee lines, buses exhausting, the usual impatience of schedules. At the headquarters of Lanyard Labs, a startup that called itself a platform because that sounded larger than printing, employees swiped badges that hummed them into glass elevators. The lobby had a living wall watered by an app and a neon sign that glowed through the day. Make every moment access. The office smelled like ambition and oat milk. In conference rooms named after synonyms for success, people planned rollouts and corrected each other's jargon. In the corner office, the skyline was a trophy case. Richard adjusted his cufflinks and told himself that last night had been an aberration he would correct with a donation and a firm compartment. On his desk was a brochure from a youth center he'd agreed to tour, a place his board wanted to feature in a campaign about impact. His assistant had scribbled directions. The center was in the old church on Juniper Avenue where basketball echoes replaced Sunday choirs. He had promised to go this afternoon. He almost canceled. He did not cancel. At lunch, the cafeteria lines in his building stretched past a chef's island where bowls of salad clinked. A woman in a hairnet handed omelets to coders. He watched, barely noticing the workers whose names never appeared in Sprint retros. His mind was occupied with a prospective airline partner, an investor who expected an audit-ready quarter, and the weight of an unexpected alley. In the youth center gym, teenagers traded jokes loud enough to bounce. Volunteers taped schedules to a bulletin board whose corners kept curling. The director, a man who had learned to fold joy around exhaustion like a burrito around beans, walked him through classrooms with mismatched chairs. In one room, a tutoring session unfolded at wobbly tables, a girl hunched over a math worksheet, pencil moving in bursts. Her backpack was patched with duct tape and pride. She looked familiar in the way a song takes 2 notes to recognize. She did not look up. He did not say anything. He did not want to be a man who made a moment into a spectacle. That evening, he stood at the picture window and watched the city's dusk turn the river to polished stone. His son ate cereal, crunches clinking like distant wind chimes, and drew on a notepad a picture of a girl holding a container, a boy offering half his gloves, a man with a tie standing back as if afraid his help might break something he didn't understand. The drawing was simple. The guilt was not.
The next day, an email pinged his screen, a routine note from HR. Cafeteria staffing shortages. Suggestion to post a temporary opening for a service lead to stabilize operations during a busy conference week. He skimmed. he almost forwarded without reading. Instead, he clicked reply, typed a sentence, deleted it, typed another. Post the role as apprenticeship with full benefits, emergency housing stipend for those at risk, partner with the youth center to recruit, build the job for someone like her. He did not write her name because he did not yet know it. He did not think of cost because he had finally learned that the price of not acting was paid by someone else. In the diner, Emily refilled coffee for a trio of night shift nurses and tried not to count the bills in her apron because counting always made the number smaller. She slept in fractions. She worried in wholes. She had a plan, though. She always had a plan, even if plans were prayers written in pencil. The second thumbnail-worthy moment arrived in the late afternoon, as thunderheads stacked in smoggy layers and wind flipped umbrellas like startled birds. In the lobby of Lanyard Labs, a tray of catered lunch slipped from a temp's hands. Boxes burst, salads avalanched, bright tomatoes cartwheeled across polished concrete. Employees sidestepped as if disaster were contagious. A janitor with a limp steered his cart forward and began to mop with a tenderness that made the moment a kind of sermon. A man in a blazer rolled his eyes, tapped his watch, and stepped wide. Richard watched from the balcony that overlooked the lobby. He watched the limp, the steady rhythm, the indifference of people who had places to be. He watched himself stiffen with the twitch of annoyance he always felt when the efficiency of his day kinked. He recognized the twitch for what it was, a small cruelty that had learned to pass as preference. The doors opened. A gust of wet air brought in a scatter of flyers from the youth center. Their field trip had been canceled by rain, and the director had hustled teens into the lobby with the promise of a hot cocoa machine. The kids swarmed, loud and damp. Among them, Emily walked, jacket soaked, hair plastered, guiding her little brother past the spill with one hand while balancing a paper cup in the other. She looked up. For a moment, her eyes met Richard's across the atrium. The world narrowed to a hallway of sightlines. He raised his hand without meaning to, a small wave that felt to him like the beginning of amends. During the tour, he introduced himself to the youth center director the way important people introduce themselves, with a grip that suggests decision. He did not mention the alley. He did not yet know how to talk about it without turning it into a performance. They stood in the cafeteria line, the kids bumping against each other like molecules, and Richard asked about internships. The director's eyes brightened in a way hope often keeps hidden. He pointed, discreetly, toward a girl, coaching a younger student through fractions with the patience of a saint who refuses the title. "She's the one who holds the roof up when it sags," the director whispered. "Her name is Emily. She's trying to finish her GED while taking care of her brother. She never asks for favors. She will not accept pity. She knows the schedules of 5 bus lines by heart." The apprenticeship went live the next morning. The link was short and sharp. The work would not be. The first applications trickled in, then a squall, then a flood. Emily stared at the listing in the computer lab, knuckles pressed white to the edge of the table. Cafeteria operations apprentice, full-time, benefits, emergency housing support. It sounded like a lifeline disguised as a job. It sounded like dignity in uniform. She applied. She did not expect anything. In the office, gatekeeping did what it always does. It began quietly. A hiring manager flagged her application. Experience, marginal, the note read. Stability, questionable. The word questionable carries 1,000-old injuries in its vowels. A junior exec rolled eyes behind a glass wall. There were concerns about optics. Bringing in someone from a shelter could be a distraction. The board would ask questions. And there was a policy about prior evictions that nobody could find the original rationale for, but it lived like a myth in a shared drive. The flaw in Richard's character reached for its usual crutches. He told himself there were processes for a reason. He told himself he couldn't bend rules just because of a night in an alley. He told himself that charity should not interrupt the clockwork of the company. He imagined the boardroom. He imagined the questions. He imagined how he would answer them without sounding like a sentimentalist. He told himself delay would deliver justice, but no delay ever delivered justice. That week, a large client visited. The company staged a demonstration in a hotel ballroom downtown, the kind with chandeliers that made everyone look like their own aspiration. The hotel's banquet staff hustled beneath the glow, pushing carts that squeaked. Outside by the service entrance, a delivery van's back doors opened to reveal a precarious tower of warmers and trays. A storm scraped across the sky. The banquet manager shouted to move faster. The delivery driver was a man with gentle eyes and a posture that apologized for existing. He wore an old brace on one knee. He took too long. The floor grew impatient. Richard, moving between rehearsals and investors, cut through the service corridor to save time. He met the delivery team head-on. The old habit spoke first. He told the driver to park somewhere else. He told him his van blocked the VIP lane. He told them they had schedules. He was not loud. He was controlled. He did not curse. But his words did the same damage a shove would have done. The driver's hand trembled around a handle. A tray tipped, warmer slid, the floor slicked with gravy. An entire dinner keen toward catastrophe. A gasp cracked the hallway. A teenage boy stepped into the slip, arms wide, stopping a cascading stack with a body too small and too brave. His shoes skated. He righted. He looked up, breathless, and grinned like falling was a story he planned to tell on purpose. It was Emily's brother. He had come to the hotel with the youth center group to see where people in badges made decisions. He had wandered. He had found the service hall. He had saved dinner with a move that would be a legend in the story he told later. Emily rushed into the corridor, hair escaping its tie, eyes scanning for her brother. She saw him braced against a metal mountain, fists clenched, grin wide. She saw the man in the suit whose words had made the delivery driver smaller. She recognized him from the balcony above the lobby and from the road where a sedan had slowed and a boy had said, "It's her." The corridor smelled like rosemary and shame. For a moment nobody moved as the last warmer settled with a metallic sigh. In the silence, the driver set a tray straight. His lips moved around a thank you he didn't quite manage. Emily placed her hands on her brother's shoulders. He leaned back into her the way small trees lean into a fence in a storm. The third thumbnail-worthy image arrived as the hotel's crystal lights fractured across steel lids, and a boy held an entire dinner in place, a sister's hand on his shoulder, a CEO with his mouth half open, realizing an apology is heavier when you have carried pride for years. He carried it anyway. He looked at the driver. "I'm sorry." The words startled even him. They were plain. They were late. They carried weight because he had not yet learned how to make them decorative. He reached for his wallet, a gesture he had perfected. He stopped. He put his hands out with nothing in them.
"Let me help." He lifted trays. He stacked. He moved that mountain. He got gravy on Italian leather. He abandoned the rehearsal and the talking points he'd practiced. In that hallway, under the fluorescent hum of a world that usually hid its labor, the man in the suit did work. He returned to the office with a stain on his sleeve and a decision in his spine. He overrode the flag on Emily's application. He recorded the reason in the system with a line nobody could misinterpret. Character is competence in motion. He signed the housing stipend with his name in ink that would put his reputation behind it. He called the board chair and made the case for a pilot program that would open hiring to candidates recommended by shelters and youth organizations, receiving support structures as part of the job, not as afterthoughts. He prepared for pushback. He decided to enjoy it. He offered Emily the apprenticeship, not charity, work, a path that wouldn't glow in neon but that would carry weight and warmth. She read the email 3 times to be sure her eyes weren't faking. She went to the youth center's office and borrowed a dress shirt from the donation closet for the orientation day. She kept the plastic container that had carried her yesterday's dinner and washed it with the tender ceremonial care of someone who knows tools are talismans. In the first week, she learned inventory codes for paper goods, how to read the rhythm of a lunch rush like a conductor parses tempo, which gloves tear and which hold, how to build a schedule around bus routes and childcare. She learned where the knife blades were dull and where the burners lied. She learned how to greet execs who didn't know cafeteria workers could be the axis of an office. She held her ground with a grace constructed from years of needing to be both soft and steel. Her brother started school again, backpack new, shoes quiet on hallways polished to reflect a second sky. He read his science teacher's notes to the cat they didn't yet own. He napped like kids nap when they finally feel safe enough to surrender. In the second week, an email thread exploded at the company like a hidden fault line. An anonymous tip to a gossip account claimed the CEO had funneled corporate funds to a pet project apprenticeship for a girl from a shelter, alleging preference and misuse. The gossip account snapped the rumor into the shape of a headline. It spread. Screenshots circled. Commenters did what commenters do. Someone posted a grainy photo from the hotel service hall. The angle made it look like the CEO had shouted. The caption did not know about apologies. The internet rarely does. In the third week, the board called for a special meeting. An investor murmured about optics. A lawyer used the phrase exposure in a way that made everyone count things instead of people.
An internal auditor pinged the HR system and raised the policy, buried and outdated, that candidates with prior evictions would be ineligible for safety-sensitive work. Safety-sensitive once meant forklifts. Today somebody applied it to serving food in a corporate cafeteria. The old myth tried to reclaim its throne. Richard's flaw, status obsession in bespoke clothing, returned to negotiate. It suggested he take a cautious half-step. It suggested he pause the program pending review, a phrase that often means put it where we won't see it again. It suggested he could keep both his reputation and his sleep by choosing prudence over courage and calling it fiduciary duty. He looked toward the window where late sunlight turned his reflection into a ghost. He remembered a night when the city was winter and a girl's hands were cracked from scrubbing tables. He remembered the way his child had said, "It's her," with a reverence he had not learned to put on balance sheets. He remembered the hotel hallway, a boy with shoes skidding and a grin that could hold up a dinner. He thought of his wife's voice, the place where kindness is not a line item but the cost of being human. He walked into the boardroom. He didn't carry slides, he carried a story. He admitted the flaw. He told them about ranking people and mistaking it for leadership. He said the policy was a relic that had made collateral damage of lives already weathered. He proposed a vote to rescind it on the spot. He pledged his own bonus to launch a fund that would support apprentices in housing, transit, and childcare. He asked the investors to match. He offered to put his name to a public statement that would make any accusation of favoritism bounce off a bedrock of transparent intent. He drew a sketch of a future where the company would be measured by whom it welcomed through the side doors, not just who glided through the front. He expected a storm. He got one. A director raised an eyebrow so high it nearly left his forehead. Another asked pointed questions about liability. A dozen years of cautious culture crowded the table. Then, the oldest member of the board, a woman who had built her first business in a garage that had smelled like gasoline and yeast, cleared her throat. Her eyes glittered with the mischief of someone who enjoys toppling unhelpful rules. She told a story about a hired hand her company had once rejected because of a probation record. He'd become her best manager. Policies can be wrong, she said. Keeping them because they're written is cowardice in calligraphy. The vote rolled across the table. It passed. The apology he wrote went out the next morning on the company's main channels and his own. It did not try to control the narrative. It did not ask for credit. It did not sell. It said, "I judged before I understood. We changed a policy that hurt people who deserved a chance. We're investing in apprenticeships that open our doors wider. This isn't charity, it's course correction. Hold me to it." It included a line he didn't anticipate would land as hard as it did. Integrity is action when no one's watching, and I wasn't watching closely enough. Employees screenshotted it and sent it to their mothers. A few deleted snark drafts they hadn't posted yet. The temp who had dropped the salads read it twice and felt something unknot in her shoulders. The janitor with the limp smiled into his mop bucket. The delivery driver lifted a box like it weighed less, because shame had left the room, and everything is lighter without it. Emily read the statement in the break room between chopping peppers and inventorying soup ladles. Her throat got tight. The word apprenticeship looked different when backed by an apology that cost something. She wiped her eyes with a paper towel and laughed at herself, then went back to slicing because food doesn't chop itself, and dignity isn't a performance. The reveal that recontextualized everything arrived in the fourth week like a quiet letter dropped through a mail slot. The youth center director forwarded a scanned document with a note, "Thought you should see this." It was a list of donors from 2 years earlier, when the center had been weeks from shutting down. At the bottom, below the anonymous gifts, a small foundation had pledged a crucial sum. The foundation's name was unfamiliar. A tax filing showed its founder, the woman whose memory had shaped Richard's life. His late wife had set it up the year before she died, a quiet pulley system to raise people she believed others would overlook. Emily's tutoring program had survived because of that check. Her brother's bus pass had been paid by that fund. The pie she had slipped to a laughing boy had its roots in a kindness traced back to a woman who had once told her husband to live a life that noticed people. Threads pulled into a single braid you could hold. The twist hit like summer thunder on a day that forgot it had scheduled rain. The woman whose memory guided M had already reached for the girl he was learning to see. The charity he had imagined he was initiating turned out to be a continuity he was finally accepting the baton for. The irony humbled him to his bones. He showed the letter to his son, who studied the names with a solemnity that belongs to children when they realized grown-ups can still be taught. He drew a fresh picture, his mother's name like a sun, rays touching a youth center, an alley, a cafeteria, a boardroom table where hands were raised.
That weekend, a new consequence made itself known, not with scandal, but with celebration. The first paycheck cleared into Emily's account with a direct deposit ping that sounded like somebody saying, "at last," in a new language. She and her brother went to a grocery store where the vegetables weren't bruised. She bought a pineapple because she could. She signed a lease for an apartment that smelled like fresh paint and possibility. She set the plastic container on the counter and promised it a rest. She hung the single plant near the window. Her brother assembled a second-hand desk and labeled his notebooks with a neatness that delighted him. He told her he liked the quiet. He liked that walls could keep out weather. He slept. Meanwhile, the apprenticeship program expanded. 2 more hires started from the shelter's referral, one a veteran with burns hidden under long sleeves, the other a foster kid who could fix anything the building would let him touch. The cafeteria hummed with a new rhythm. People lingered longer, not because the food changed, but because the air had. It had respect in it. The story should have ended with a montage. A man rolling up his sleeves, a girl finishing her GED and enrolling in night classes at the community college, a boy winning the science fair with a project about bridge design and resilience. It should have faded to a moral printed over slow-motion smiles. But life, faithful to its own structure, loves a cliff. A blogger with a large following published a thread about the apprenticeship program that reframed it as favoritism for one person rescued from an alley. The thread included a rumor, false but sticky, that the CEO had started the program to impress investors with a publicity-ready act of kindness captured by staged photos. It accused the company of buying redemption and exploiting a girl's story for clicks. It attached the grainy hotel photo taken at the worst possible angle. It tagged regulators, activists, and anyone whose outrage could be summoned by an artfully arranged collage of half-truths. The thread went viral in the way oil goes downriver, fast, slick, and leaving a sheen that takes weeks to scrub off. Inboxes filled. Sponsors called the boardroom. A state agency announced a review of the company's charitable partnerships to ensure compliance with labor laws. The word audit appeared next to the word immediate in a subject line. A partner paused a deal. The investor who had voted yes called to ask if no would have been easier. The janitor's shift was cut by a well-meaning manager who panicked and froze overtime. The youth center director fielded reporters with energy he needed for kids. Comments, that unreliable river, carried cruelty dressed as skepticism. On a Tuesday, while the sun pretended everything was fine, an envelope slid under the door of the cafeteria office with no return address. Inside was a printout of a private medical record. Stolen, anonymized, terrifying, about a child who needed a bone marrow match. A single line was underlined in furious ink. The blood type matched Emily's. The hospital name matched the place where Richard's wife had been treated years ago. The forms were old. The date on the file was before the alley, before the apprenticeship, before anyone thought to take a picture. Whoever sent it wanted chaos. Whoever sent it knew that chaos, when it arrives, brings company. Emily lifted the page, hand shaking. It occurred to her that a past she didn't know she had might be attached to a future she had not planned for. It occurred to her that kindness could require a sacrifice she had not yet priced. In a conference room 3 floors up, Richard's phone vibrated with 2 notifications that collided like cars. The audit would begin at dawn, and the hospital asked if he could come in to discuss a match for a child donor registry search that had just flagged a lead from a routine screening at a community clinic. Hers. He headed for the staircase instead of the elevator, breath shallow, every step a drum. In the cafeteria office, Emily folded the paper as carefully as if it were made of light and tucked it into the washed plastic container she had promised to retire. She walked out into the dining room where lunch had quieted into a gentle clatter and looked up as he pushed through the door, tie slightly crooked from running. They stood under track lighting and over tile that still remembered the day it had been born clean. Between them was the distance of choices. On a table, a phone buzzed, and buzzed again with a new notification that turned the volume of trouble from loud to louder. An anonymous source had leaked internal emails about the board vote, taken out of context, framed as corruption. A second headline bloomed. State attorney announced investigation into corporate misconduct.
The floor seemed to tilt, and everything less important slid. The moral of this story, stated as plainly as the truth that first cracked Richard's chest open, is simple enough to write on a napkin and hard enough to live without practice. Do not judge by appearances. Verify before you vilify. Integrity is action when no one's watching, and correction is courage when everyone is. He drew a breath that tried to be steady. She touched the container as if it were a talisman. Somewhere upstairs, an investor typed a message that would land like a hammer. Somewhere downstairs, a teenager in a science classroom drew a bridge with an extra strut because the test models had buckled there last time. And then, the cafeteria lights flickered, as if the building itself had something to say. The doors opened. Two strangers in plain suits walked in with badges that didn't glow under the neon sign, and the room fell quiet around their footsteps. The lead investigator asked for a room to talk. At the same moment, a nurse from the hospital called back twice in a row, the kind of repeated ring that refuses to be ignored, while a reporter's email landed with a legal question that could bend a life. Richard looked at Emily. Emily looked at her brother coming through the door with a smile that didn't know the world had shifted. The first investigator opened a folder. The phone on the table buzzed again, insistent now, a pulse. Somewhere, the viral thread refreshed with a new